After suffering defeat against the Allies during an alternate timeline of the Second World War, Alexander Romanov would become the new premier of the Soviet Union, replacing its former leader Joseph Stalin. Initially, Romanov was an advocate of peace and promoted good relations with the Allied nations. However, Romanov would come under the influence of a man known only as Yuri, a powerful psychic who could bend the minds of others to his will. Using his formidable psychic powers, Yuri influenced Romanov to reignite war with the Allies. Romanov was convinced that this time, the Union could defeat the Allies, establishing Soviet dominance over the planet. Unbeknownst to Romanov, however, Yuri had his own plans for world domination. As the war raged between the Allies and Soviet Union, Yuri secretly formed his own personal army. Yuri used this army to capture and protect sites where he would construct superweapons called Psychic Dominators. Regardless of who would win the Third World War, Yuri would be the true victor, using his Dominators to mind control the entire planet. The Allies, having once again defeated the Soviet Union, relied on Albert Einstein to create a time machine that would take their forces back in time to stop the Psychic Dominator disaster from occurring. Alternatively, the surviving Soviet military forces could have captured this time machine for themselves, and used it to do the same. No matter which faction traveled back to the past, the Soviets and Allies would be engaging directly with Yuri's personal army, which consisted of some of the strangest and wackiest units either side had ever seen. When it came to psychic infantry units, Yuri primarily relied on clones of himself, as there was no other psychic as powerful as him. However, there were many psychically gifted individuals who could learn much from Yuri, and these initiates joined his army in droves.
I am but a student.
While their minds weren't yet strong enough to bend the wills of others, they could, with the help of technological enhancements, conjure balls of fire using only their minds. These conjured fireballs could be launched at enemies, quickly setting them on fire. This made the initiates highly effective against infantry units. This effect was amplified if the initiates were garrisoned inside a building, providing them greater protection against retaliatory attacks. The downside, especially for less experienced initiates, was that their fireballs were only effective at short ranges, requiring them to get very close to the enemy. This meant that some initiates would inevitably lose their lives moving within range. Veteran initiates had better control over their telepathic powers, and could therefore launch fireballs further away, as well as conjure them at a faster rate. The heat of their fireballs even did increased damage, making them more effective at destroying base structures, and even some armored vehicles. Not all initiates would be engaged in combat. Many would be stationed in support roles, such as being vehicle drivers or staff inside Yuri's base structures. Composing much of his army with initiates meant that Yuri didn't have to worry about supplying them with firearms and ammunition. Such weapons would instead be given to female sharpshooters, who went by the codename Virus.
I am so very contagious.
These viral agents were armed with a long-range rifle, which was capable of eliminating any infantry unit with a single strike. Their rifles didn't use standard bullets though. Instead, they were loaded with a special dart that injected the victim with a toxin. This toxin caused the victim's body to quickly expand and then violently burst. Left behind after the victim's death would be a green cloud of the very toxin that killed them. This cloud was highly contagious to any infantry units that moved through it. Infantry that remained in the toxic cloud would eventually succumb to its effects, causing them to meet a gruesome end, one that further spread the toxin around. This cloud was so corrosive that it could even cause damage to some vehicles. Yuri's own forces could be harmed by this toxic residue, except Virus herself, who seemed to be exclusively inoculated against her own toxins.
Free inoculations.
While Virus was deadly against enemy infantry, her rifle was useless against vehicles and structures. It would take a while for Virus to reload her rifle, which was also heavy to carry around, causing her to move slowly across the battlefield. In addition, British snipers were a solid counter to Virus, as their own rifles had superior range. In order to counter the Allies who were deliberately seeking out and destroying his bases, Yuri had his forces occupy the city of Seattle in Washington. Here, they seized the campus of the Massive Soft Corporation, forcing its CEO, Chairman Bing, to support Yuri's war effort. According to the chairman, Massive Soft's R&D department provided Yuri with software related to genetics. The Allies were able to successfully liberate the city, but not before Yuri could utilize the stolen software to later create a dedicated anti-tank infantry unit called the Brute.
Give me something to break!
These gray-skinned, genetically engineered, hulking monstrosities were created to crush anything that got in their way. Infantry that found themselves in close quarters combat with the Brutes were no match, being instantly smashed by their powerful fists. Brutes had the most fun when fighting armored units, as they enjoyed ripping apart the vehicles with their bare hands.
It's clobbering time, no?
What made Brutes such an effective anti-armor infantry unit was the fact that they couldn't be run over by vehicles, with the exception of the Allies' battle fortress. Attack dogs were no match for the Brute either, often preferring to completely avoid them. Despite their size, Brutes could move swiftly across the battlefield, easily closing the distance between them and their targets. Brutes had a visor attached over their eyes, which I assume grants them improved vision, which may have naturally become impaired as a consequence of their mutation. This could also explain why Brutes had a more childish personality.
I like big toys!
The most effective counter to the Brutes was to kill them before they got in range to use their fists, a task sometimes easier said than done, due to the Brutes being able to absorb light weapons fire before succumbing. Aircraft were the most effective counter, as Brutes had no way of attacking them from the ground. Soviet terror drones also proved to be a decent counter, as they could instantly kill a Brute, though could also be instantly destroyed by one in return. While Yuri had plenty of willing, and unwilling, volunteers to transform into Brutes, the process would take a while. Seeking a way to mutate masses of humans into loyal Brutes, Yuri continued to use the stolen data from Massive Soft to create a superweapon called the Genetic Mutator. The Genetic Mutator was a large antenna that required a substantial amount of power. Once fully charged, a strand of energy danced around the antenna until it was deployed at the target location. Any humans present at the designated location would have their DNA swiftly altered, transforming them into Brutes. This included commando units such as the Soviets' Boris or the Allies' Tanya. The Genetic Mutator only worked on humans, so trying to use the device on other animals such as attack dogs and dolphins would simply kill them, an effect that would prove useful in certain situations. Humans that were garrisoned inside buildings or vehicles would be protected from the mutator's transformative effects. It only affected ground-level infantry units too, so Allied Rocketeers would remain safe while in the air. During the final battle against his remaining stronghold in the Antarctic, Yuri deployed a genetic mutator, transforming Allied and Soviet infantry units into Brutes in a desperate attempt to defeat the Allied commander, one that would ultimately fail. The Allies and the Soviets quickly realized that robotic units were the best counter to Yuri's psychic forces, as they couldn't be mind-controlled. Yuri wasn't opposed to using such robots against his enemies, and so developed his own called the Chaos Drone. This small, lightly armored, but speedy drone was armed with a hallucinogenic gas. This red-colored gas would be dispersed in a wide 360-degree radius around the drone, via several nozzles on its turret. Any enemy units caught within the gas would go berserk, causing them to turn on their compatriots. While in this violent, berserk state, the affected units have magnified attack power, eliminating their targets faster than normal. The berserk units will also target Yuri's own, but only after they've eliminated their compatriots through friendly fire. No matter what though, the affected units won't attack the Chaos Drone itself. Even if the Chaos Drone is destroyed after releasing the gas, its effects will linger for several seconds on any affected units. This is a valuable upside, as the drone's light armor meant it could be quickly destroyed by those units unaffected by the gas. enemy drones, as well as animals, are immune to the Chaos Drone's hallucinogenic attack. Yuri made considerable use of these drones in Sydney, Australia, patrolling the streets and dispersing their gas among Allied units attempting to move through the city, protecting Yuri's vital cloning facilities nearby. Yuri had a unique artillery vehicle in his arsenal, called the Magnetron.
Magnetic field commencing.
Calling it an artillery vehicle isn't entirely correct, as it wouldn't lob shells at targets far away. Instead, it was equipped with a giant magnet that, when focused on a single vehicle, would levitate it into the air and pull the vehicle toward the Magnetron. When the target vehicle arrives at the Magnetron's location, it is set back down on the ground. The Magnetron could use its device to bring friendly vehicles over bodies of water, or possibly rescue them from a dire situation. More often, however, the Magnetron would use its weapon against enemy vehicles. While ensnared by the Magnetron, enemy vehicles couldn't move or use any of their weapons. The vehicle would be dropped off at a location where Yuri's forces were standing by to either destroy or mind control it. Alternatively, levitated vehicles were considered air units and could be targeted by Yuri's Gatling tanks. Ideally though, the enemy units captured by Magnetrons would be levitated over a body of water. Once accomplished, the Magnetrons would disable their weapons, causing the vehicles to fall into the water, drowning them along with their crews. The Magnetron's weapon could even be used against naval vessels, pulling them out of the water and dropping them off on land, instantly destroying them. While the Magnetron wasn't strong enough to levitate structures, it could focus its intense magnetic beam on them to cause direct damage. In this way, the Magnetron acts more akin to a mobile artillery vehicle, at least when destroying structures from a distance. The Magnetron's primary weakness was that its beam had no effect on infantry or air units. Additionally, light armor meant it could be quickly disposed of when directly fired upon by an enemy. Yuri didn't have much of an air force, primarily relying on transport planes to move his forces around the world. He did, however, have the most unique aircraft in his arsenal, in the form of the floating disc.
Disc in flight.
Using highly advanced levitation technology, the floating disc would take flight from one of Yuri's war factories. It made a unique sound when flying, which made it a not-so-stealthy unit. While slower than smaller aircraft, such as the Allies' Harrier, the disc could fly faster than the Soviets' Kirov. But unlike the Kirov, the disc wasn't a bomber, instead acting more like a disruption unit that would distress the enemy, a role that it went about in several ways. On the disc's underbelly was a weapon that could shut down any defense structure that required power, such as Prism Towers, Tesla Towers, flak cannons, and more. The structure remains shut down for as long as the disc maintains its focus on it, which is achieved by directly hovering over the target structure. While shutting down a single defense structure was useful, it would be better to shut down all defense structures by cutting the base's power. The disc could achieve this by hovering over a single enemy power plant and using its disruption weapon to shut it down. This in turn would shut down all other power plants, bringing all power-reliant defenses offline. Such a circumstance made the base highly vulnerable to a full-on assault by Yuri's forces. Sometimes, what Yuri's army needed most was more credits, and what better way to acquire more than to steal it from his enemies? The floating disc was equipped to do just that, by simply hovering over an enemy refinery and siphoning credits from its accounts.
I'd like to make a withdrawal.
Anti-air infantry units attempting to shoot down the disc would have to contend with its laser beam, which, while having a slow rate of fire due to its charge time, could quickly melt them down. This beam could be used against enemy aircraft, and was also decent at destroying buildings, especially if multiple discs were targeting a single structure. The floating disc was also well armored, so it could not be brought down quickly unless the defender had substantial anti-air firepower. Any damage that the floating disc sustained could be repaired by the crew when out of combat. During the Soviet campaign of events, the Soviets discovered that Yuri had a secret base located on the moon. They sent a special task force to the moon to destroy this base. This mission would be difficult, given the Soviet force would be limited to weapon systems that could function in the vacuum of space. As such, no aircraft were available to aid the Soviets' lunar forces. Yuri didn't have this problem, as his floating disks were fully capable of operating in the vacuum of space. Despite this, the Soviets were able to field many cosmonauts, who overwhelmed the few floating disks Yuri had there. With the disks and other defenders dealt with, the Soviets destroyed Yuri's lunar command center, securing the moon for the Union. During the Allies' campaign, the floating disk was first encountered in London, where its leaders were meeting with Premier Romanov to sign a peace treaty at Parliament. Yuri wanted to prevent this from happening, knowing that the combined efforts of the Soviets and Allies would lead to his demise. Unfortunately for Yuri, the Allies' defenses around Parliament were too strong, despite the support of the floating disks. After the ratification of the peace treaty, Yuri would be captured by the Allies, putting his plans for psychic world domination to an end. Shortly after Yuri's imprisonment, the two timelines of the Third World War would merge, resulting in a single timeline, one where Yuri and his personal army seemingly no longer existed. Because of this, few remember the strange and wacky units the power-hungry psychic created to aid him in his goal of world domination.